Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been more of an obligation than a celebration. Every year, we packed up the car, drove to their place, and endured the usual routine: overcooked turkey, forced smiles, and thinly veiled judgment. But this year, something felt off. Jake and I walked in with our kids, Ethan and Lily, and everything seemed normal at first. The house was filled with laughter. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey hung in the air, and my dad was already halfway into his first whiskey. My mom, as usual, had outdone herself with the decorations, the dining table looking like it belonged in a magazine. For a brief moment, I let myself believe it would be a good evening. Then came the gift exchange. It wasn't unusual for my parents to hand out little presents during Thanksgiving, just something small for the grandkids, a tradition they'd started years ago. Ethan and Lily were practically bouncing in their seats, watching their cousins unwrap new tablets, gaming consoles, and designer sneakers. One by one, every child received something, except mine. I waited. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe my mom had just forgotten for a second. "Mom?" I kept my voice light. "Did you forget Ethan and Lily's gifts?" She looked at me, arms crossed, expression cold. "We didn't forget," she said. "We didn't get them anything." For a second, I thought I misheard her. "What?" "They don't deserve it," she continued, her tone clipped. "Just like you. They're ungrateful." Silence. The kind that sucks the air out of the room. I felt Lily's little hand clutch mine, her excitement replaced by confusion. Ethan, always trying to be the tough one, swallowed hard, his face falling. Around us, no one spoke. Andrew looked away, pretending he hadn't heard. My cousins exchanged glances but said nothing. It was like they all knew this was coming, like it was just another round of family drama they'd rather not get involved in. Jake squeezed my shoulder. "Sarah, let's go." His voice was calm, but I could feel the anger simmering beneath it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers, to make my parents see what they were doing. But looking at my mother's face, so resolute, so sure of herself, I knew it wouldn't matter. So I stood up, took my kids' hands, and walked out. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet night. And in that moment, I made a decision. This was the last time they would ever hurt my children. The car ride home was silent, except for the occasional sniffle from the back seat. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Jake sat beside me, jaw clenched, his usual easygoing demeanor nowhere to be found. From the rearview mirror, I saw Ethan staring out the window, his face set in quiet anger. Lily, on the other hand, had no such restraint. "Why didn't Grandma and Grandpa get us presents?" she asked softly, her voice cracking. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't know, sweetheart." That was a lie. I knew exactly why. Because to my parents, I was nothing more than an ATM, a resource to be drained, a daughter who owed them simply for existing. And now, they had decided my children didn't deserve love, didn't deserve inclusion just because I had the audacity to say no. I replayed the last few months in my head. My parents had been pushing me to buy them a new house, claiming theirs was falling apart. When I refused, they made it clear they expected me to, at the very least, fund the entire renovation. And like the fool I was, I agreed, paying for new plumbing, rewiring, drywall, everything. $21,000 spent, and the work wasn't even finished. But it was never enough. It never would be. I exhaled sharply, the weight of it all crashing down on me. They had punished my children to get back at me. Fine. If they wanted to treat us like we didn't matter, then they could figure out their mess on their own. By the time we pulled into the driveway, my mind was made up. I parked, turned to Jake, and said the words before I could second-guess myself. "I'm cutting them off." He met my eyes, scanning my face for hesitation. He didn't find any. "Good," he said simply. "They don't deserve your help." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. While the rest of the house slept, I grabbed my phone and dialed Christine's number. She was my cousin, but more importantly, she was also the project manager overseeing my parents' renovation. "Hey, Christine," the first said the moment she picked up. "Cancel everything." There was a pause. "Sarah, are you sure? The second floor is still." "I don't care," I cut in. "Tell the crew they're done after this week. No more work, no more money. My parents can figure it out themselves." Christine let out a low whistle. "Damn, they're They're gonna lose it. Let them, I said. They made their choice. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was making mine. I knew it wouldn't take long for the fallout to start. Sure enough, by noon, my phone was already vibrating nonstop. First, it was Andrew, straight to voicemail. Then my dad, decline. Finally, my mom's name flashed across the screen. I sighed and answered. Hello? Are you out of your mind? She snapped, skipping past any greeting. Christine just told us you canceled the renovations. The entire second floor is torn apart. How do you expect us to live like this? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice even. That's not my problem anymore. A stunned silence. Then she let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so you think you can just walk away? After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I repeated slowly, my grip on the phone tightening. You mean the years of guilt tripping? The constant demands? The way you humiliated my kids in front of the whole family? Don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. They need to learn that the world doesn't hand out rewards for bad behavior. Bad behavior. That was how she justified it. I pressed my fingers against my temple, willing myself to stay calm. You're unbelievable, I muttered. You think you're punishing us? She continued, voice sharp. You're only making yourself look bad. The whole family is talking about how selfish you're being, how you're letting your own parents suffer just because your feelings got hurt. I exhaled slowly, my patience hanging by a thread. They can talk all they want, but I'm done. Sarah, I ended the call before she could finish. Not even 5 minutes later, Andrew was at my door. I barely had time to process his presence before he was inside, pacing the entryway. You're making a huge mistake, he said, voice tight with frustration. Nice to see you too, I said dryly, crossing my arms. Mom and Dad are freaking out. The house is unlivable, and you're just cutting them off? I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I don't remember you offering to help with the renovations, or any of our dear relatives stepping up. Andrew rubbed his temples. That's different. They expected you to handle it. Of course they did, I scoffed, because I've spent my whole life cleaning up their messes. But not anymore. He let out a heavy sigh. Look, I know they screwed up. What they did to Ethan and Lily was harsh. I get it. But this is just how Mom is. She doesn't mean half the things she says. That's not an excuse, I said firmly. She meant it enough to let my kids sit there and wonder why their grandparents didn't love them. Andrew hesitated. You're still their daughter, he tried. You're supposed to take care of family. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, that's rich. Mom and Dad didn't think twice about cutting me out emotionally, but I'm supposed to be the bigger person? That's not how this works. Andrew looked at me, his expression unreadable. You'll regret this, he said finally. Mom and Dad won't forget what you've done. Good, I shot back. Neither will I. He left without another word. For a moment I just stood there, staring at the closed door, my heart pounding. I knew cutting them off was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. That night, I sat with Jake on the couch, the exhaustion of the day weighing down on me. You okay? He asked, rubbing my back. I sighed. I don't know. It's just hard. I keep wondering if I should feel guilty. Jake turned to face me, his expression serious. Sarah, they're the ones who should feel guilty, not you. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach didn't go away. And as much as I wanted to believe that this was over, I knew deep down it was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. But I also knew it wasn't over. My parents weren't the kind of people to accept consequences gracefully. I was right. By the time I finished my morning coffee, my phone was already buzzing with new messages. Mom, 7:03 a.m. You're being ridiculous. You can't just abandon us. Dad, 7:45 a.m. Call me back. We need to talk. Andrew, 8:12 a.m. You're making this worse for everyone. I ignored all of them. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the joint account I had set up years ago to help manage their expenses. Over time, I had poured thousands into that account money they used without a second thought. Not anymore. Without hesitation, I transferred the remaining balance into my personal account and closed it. Almost instantly, my phone rang. It was my mother. I smirked and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. This time I picked up. What the hell did you do? She shrieked, skipping any pretense of civility. I took my money back, I said calmly. Since, you don't need anything from me. That account was for the family, she spat. I laughed coldly. Oh, really? You mean the same family that just made it very clear I don't count? She was silent for a second, then tried a different tactic. Sarah, sweetheart, she said, her tone suddenly softer. You're overreacting. We didn't mean to hurt Ethan and Lily. It was just a lesson. A lesson? My grip on the phone tightened. You humiliated my kids in front of the entire family, just to prove a point. Don't be so dramatic, she snapped, her patience running out. Your children need to learn that life isn't fair. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Oh, don't worry, Mom. They've learned plenty, like how some people only see them as tools for manipulation. But here's the thing, you don't get to use me anymore. You wanted me out of your life? Fine. You got your wish. She let out a bitter laugh. And you think this won't have consequences? I rolled my eyes. Oh, I'm shaking. Sarah, you are going to regret this, she hissed. No, I said, voice steady. I won't. Then I hung up. The fallout, by the end of the day, the whole family knew. Christine, my cousin, called first. Damn, Sarah, you really went nuclear. I sighed. They pushed me into it. No arguments here, she said. But, you should know they're telling everyone you stole from them. I laughed. Stole? That was my money. Yeah, well, they're painting a different picture. Dad called me earlier and said they were left in financial ruin because of you. Unbelievable. Yeah, and now some of the aunts and uncles are taking sides. Aunt Linda says you're tearing the family apart. Uncle Greg thinks you're being too emotional. I let out a humorless laugh. Funny how none of them cared when my kids were crying on Thanksgiving. Exactly, Christine agreed. And for what it's worth, most of the cousins think you did the right thing. Honestly, we've all dealt with their manipulation in some way. That caught me off guard. Wait, what? Yeah, she said. You're just the first one to actually cut them off. That sat with me for a moment. I had spent years feeling like I was the unreasonable one, the ungrateful daughter who never did enough. But now, I realized my parents had been pulling this crap on everyone. I had just been their biggest target, and now they were panicking. The final attempt. 2 days later, Andrew showed up at my house again. This time, he looked exhausted. Mom and Dad are a mess, he said the moment I opened the door. I leaned against the frame. Not my problem. Sarah, come on, he said, rubbing his face. They're desperate. The renovations aren't done, the bills are piling up, and they don't know what to do. I shrugged. Sounds like they should have thought about that before they decided to burn every bridge they had. He sighed. Look, I know they were awful to you, I cut in. Try are. They don't regret what they did, Andrew. They regret that it didn't work. He hesitated, and for a second, I thought he might actually admit I was right. But then he shook his head. They're still our parents. I met his eyes, my voice firm, and I'm still a mother. My first priority is to my kids, not them. Andrew exhaled sharply. You really won't help them? No, I said simply. He stared at me for a long moment, then finally nodded. All right, but just so you know, I think you did the right thing. That surprised me. Wait, what? He gave me a tired smile. Yeah, they've been doing this to me too, just in smaller ways. Watching you stand up to them, it's made me rethink a lot of things. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than frustration relief. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone in this as I thought. It had been a week since I cut off my parents financially, and I expected the silence to last. But people like them didn't go down without a fight. I was in the middle of making lunch when Jake walked into the kitchen holding up my phone. They're here. I froze. Who? He didn't need to answer. A second later, there was a loud, rapid knock at the door. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and went to open it. There they were. My mother, looking unusually nervous, and my father, his face set in a stony expression. Sarah, my mother said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. Why? Didn't you say I wasn't part of the family anymore? My father cleared his throat. That's not what we meant. You literally said there would be consequences for what I did, I interrupted. And now that those consequences have come back to bite you, you suddenly want to talk? My mother's face twitched. We made a mistake, she said finally. We let things get out of hand. We shouldn't have done what we did. I waited for her to say more. Something. Anything that resembled an actual apology. But of course, that was it. No acknowledgement of the way they hurt my kids. No real regret. Just desperation. I leaned against the doorframe. Let me guess. You're in over your heads? My father's jaw tightened, but my mother sighed. Yes, the house is a disaster. The contractors won't finish without more payments. and we don't have the money to cover it." I raised an eyebrow. "And whose fault is that?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, please, we're asking for your help." There it was. Not an apology, not remorse, just a plea for more money. I let out a dry laugh. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about the renovations. It's about everything." I gestured behind me, where I knew my kids were playing in the living room. "You didn't just insult me, you hurt them. And for what? Because I didn't do exactly what you wanted?" My father finally spoke, his voice laced with irritation. "Sarah, don't be childish. Family helps family." I let out a sharp breath. "No, I helped family over and over again. And in return, you treated my children like garbage just to prove a point." My mother stepped forward, voice strained. "Sarah, you know how we are. We didn't mean you meant every word." I cut her off. "You looked my kids in the eyes and decided they weren't worthy of being treated like family. You think you can come here now, say a few half-hearted words, and I'll just forget? No." My father let out a frustrated breath. "Sarah, we raised you. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you." I laughed bitterly. "And I paid you back for all of that 10 times over. I gave you money when you needed it. I paid for your damn house repairs. And somehow, that still wasn't enough for you. That's not fair." My mother protested weakly. I looked at her, really looked at her. The carefully controlled, manipulative woman I had known my whole life was unraveling. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't reflecting. She was just scared. For years, I had bent over backward, trying to earn their love, their approval. But now, standing in front of them, watching them beg not because they cared about me, but because they needed me, something inside me finally clicked. I was done. I shook my head. "You don't get to use me anymore. You made your choice." My father's expression darkened. "So, that's it? You're really willing to abandon your own parents?" "No," I said simply. "You abandoned me a long time ago. I'm just making it official." My mother's breath hitched. "Sarah, please. If you don't help us, we'll lose everything." For a brief second, I hesitated, not because I felt guilty, but because it was pathetic to see them like this, to see the people who once held power over me reduced to begging. But they had made their bed. I stepped back. "Then you'd better figure it out." And with that, I shut the door in their faces. The aftermath. The next few weeks were quiet. My parents stopped calling. Andrew didn't show up again. But I heard through Christine that things weren't looking great for them. The renovations were stalled, they were behind on bills, and most importantly, they had burned almost every bridge in the family. Apparently, some of the other relatives were starting to see them for who they really were. Christine called one evening, amusement clear in her voice. "So, guess what? Aunt Linda tried to guilt-trip me into paying for their house repairs." I snorted. "Let me guess you said no?" "Damn right I did," she laughed. "Told her if she felt so bad, she could pay for it herself. And she suddenly didn't feel that bad anymore." I shook my head, smiling. It was strange, after all these years, to finally feel free. Jake and I started building new traditions with Ethan and Lily. We had our first real family holiday one, without guilt, without obligation, just the four of us, laughing over dinner, opening gifts without the weight of expectations. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Christine summed it up best during one of our calls. "You did the right thing, Sarah. Sometimes cutting people off isn't about revenge. It's about protecting yourself." She was right. And as far as I was concerned, my parents were no longer part of my life. They had made their choice, and now they had to live with it. The war was over, and I had won. Story 2. I never expected my life to flip upside down in the span of a week. One moment, I was packing my bags to spend time with my father, hoping to be there for him in his last days. The next, I was planning his funeral, blindsided by grief and the chaos that came with it. My dad, Richard, had been sick for a while, and when my uncle called to say things weren't looking good, I didn't hesitate. I left everything behind: school, work, even my strained relationship with my mother to be with him. I thought maybe, in some way, I could return the favor for all the times he had been there for me. But life had other plans. A week after I arrived, he was gone. A heart attack took him in his sleep, just like that. Handling his funeral arrangements was overwhelming, but I didn't have time to fall apart. Between contacting relatives, signing paperwork, and making sure everything was in order, I barely had a moment to breathe. Still, there was one person I knew had to be told. Even if she no longer cared, my mother, Diane. I called her, expecting at least a half-hearted "I'm sorry." Instead, there was silence. I thought the call had dropped, so I repeated myself. Her response? And what do you expect me to do about it? I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Yes, my parents had divorced years ago. And yes, my mother had moved on, new husband, new family, new life. But this wasn't about their failed marriage. This was about me losing my dad, and she couldn't even muster a shred of sympathy. I hung up without another word. I didn't have the energy to deal with her indifference. A few days later, as I was finalizing the funeral details, I got a call from my childhood neighbor, Miss S. Thompson. She wasn't calling to offer condolences. She was calling to ask why I was moving out. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. She hesitated. Your mom's been telling everyone you decided to leave. She's been clearing out your room, selling some of your things, throwing the rest away. My heart dropped. I could barely process what she was saying. My room, my belongings, the things I had collected over the years, my books, my guitar, even the record player Dad had given me for my 16th birthday. Gone. I ended the call and immediately dialed my mother. The second she picked up, I didn't even let her speak. How dare you? My voice shook with rage. You're selling my things while I'm burying Dad? Caught off guard, she stammered. How did you? Who told you that? Does it matter? You did it, didn't you? After a few seconds of silence, she sighed. Greg and the kids need space. It's their home too, Alex. Her new husband, Greg, her stepkids. Of course, I had never resented my step-siblings, Ethan and Mia. They were good kids. But Greg? He was an entitled leech, always looking for ways to make things work in his favor. And my mother? She had spent years bending over backward to please him, even if it meant pushing me aside. But selling my things while I was at my father's funeral? That wasn't just neglect, it was a betrayal. Where's the money, Mom? I asked, my voice eerily calm. She hesitated. It's gone. I let out a bitter laugh. Let me guess. You spent it on gifts for Greg's kids? She didn't deny it. I could barely see straight from the anger coursing through me. I had been planning to take my things with me when I left for college. She knew that. But instead, she saw an opportunity to erase me from her new life and took it. What she didn't know was that fate had other plans. Because while I was sorting through my dad's affairs, I found something unexpected, a will. And what was in that will changed everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother rummaging through my room, tossing my things aside like they meant nothing. I kept picturing my dad's record player sitting in some stranger's house, my books thrown into the trash. It wasn't just about the objects, it was the memories, the pieces of my life that she had decided weren't worth keeping. By morning I was exhausted, but I had work to do. My uncle, David, was helping me go through Dad's paperwork, making sure everything was in order. That's when we found it, a will. I stared at the thick envelope, my hands shaking. See, my dad always told me he didn't believe in wills or legal documents when it came to family. He used to say, people should do right by each other because it's the right thing to do, not because the law says so. So the fact that he had one, that meant something. I tore it open, scanning the pages. Then I saw at the house, the one my mom had been living in since the divorce. It was never hers. All those years, she must have assumed that in the split, Dad had handed it over to her. Maybe she thought that just because he left, she automatically got the house. But legally, it was still in his name. And now, with him gone, it was mine. The anger from the night before hadn't faded, but now, it had a new edge. My mother had treated me like I was disposable. She had stolen from me, tossed me aside like I was an inconvenience. And all this time, she had been living in a house she never even owned. She was about to find that out the hard way. I didn't tell her right away. I wanted to do things the right way, get the paperwork sorted, make sure everything was airtight. My uncle helped me file the necessary legal documents to officially transfer the house into my name. Then, once everything was in order, I packed my bags and headed back home. The moment I stepped through the front door, I knew she hadn't expected me to come back. My mom was sitting on the couch with Greg, the two of them laughing about something. The second she saw me, her face twisted into something between surprise and irritation. Alex, she said, like she wasn't sure if I was real. What are you doing here? I dropped my bag by the door. I live here. Or did you forget? Greg scoffed. You haven't been here in weeks. We assumed you were moving out. I turned to face him. We assumed, or you assumed? His smug grin faltered just a little. Mom stood up, crossing her arms. Alex, I don't have time for this. If you're back to cause drama, I cut her off. No drama, just a conversation. I gestured to the dining table. Sit. She hesitated, then walked over. Greg followed, looking irritated. Once they were seated, I took out the folder with the will and placed it in front of them. Mom glanced at it, then at me. What's this? I leaned forward. It's Dad's will, the one that says this house belongs to me. I'll never forget the way her face drained of color. 1 second, she was confident, almost annoyed with me. The next, she looked like she had been punched in the gut. Greg grabbed the papers, flipping through them. This has to be a mistake. My uncle, who had been waiting quietly in the kitchen, stepped forward. It's not. His voice was calm, steady. The house was never transferred to Diane in the divorce. Richard left it to Alex. Legally, it belongs to him now. Silence. Then my mother did what she always did when things didn't go her way. She got angry. This is ridiculous, she snapped, shoving the papers back at me. I've lived here for years. This is my home. I stayed calm. No, Mom, it's not. Greg stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go. I shrugged. Funny. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. Mom's eyes flashed. That's different. We thought you were leaving. Did you, though? I tilted my head. Or was it just easier to pretend I didn't exist? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Greg, on the other hand, wasn't ready to let it go. You're a selfish little brat, he spat. After everything your mother has done for you, I laughed. Actually laughed. Everything she's done for me? You mean selling my things while I was at my dad's funeral? Throwing out my stuff like I was already gone? Let me tell you something, Greg. My dad took care of me. My mom took care of you. Mom flinched. Greg went red in the face, but for once, he didn't have anything to say. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Look, I'm not heartless. I'm not going to throw you and the kids out on the street, but things are going to change. Mom looked hopeful for a second. So, you'll let us stay? I nodded. For a price. Greg frowned. What do you mean? I mean rent, I said simply. If you want to stay here, you're going to pay market value rent. And Greg? I met his eyes. That doesn't include you. You're out, he exploded. You can't do that, I shrugged. I can, and I am. Mom looked at me pleading now. Alex, please. Think about Ethan and Mia. They love this house. They have friends here. School. I softened slightly. I never wanted to hurt the kids. They weren't the problem. They can stay. But you're paying rent, Mom. And Greg is leaving. Her expression twisted, a mix of anger and desperation. And if I say no, I leaned back in my chair. Then you find somewhere else to live. Silence stretched between us. Greg slammed his fists on the table. This isn't over, I smirked. It is for you. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Mom just sat there, staring at the papers. She looked small, like for the first time, she realized she wasn't in control. I stood up, grabbing my bag. Rent starts next month. You can let me know your decision. Then I walked upstairs to what was left of my room. I had won, but somehow, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. The house was quiet after Greg left, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that sat heavy in the air, like a storm had passed. But you knew another one was brewing in the distance. Mom stayed at the table for a long time, staring at the papers, not saying a word. I didn't bother sticking around. I had nothing else to say. Upstairs, my room was exactly how I feared it would be, half empty. The shelves where my books used to be, bare. The corner where my guitar stood, empty. The spot on my dresser where Dad's record player sat, gone. It hit me harder than I expected. I had already known she sold my things, but seeing the empty spaces made it real. I sat on the bed, running my hand over the blanket. It didn't even feel like my room anymore, just a space that had been waiting to be erased. A soft knock at the door made me look up. Ethan. He stood in the doorway, shifting awkwardly. He was just a kid, 13 now? But the look on his face was more serious than it should have been. Hey, he mumbled. I nodded. Hey, he hesitated, then stepped inside, holding something behind his back. I saved this. He pulled out Dad's old wristwatch, the one he gave me for my 18th birthday. I stared at it, my throat tightening. Mom was gonna sell it, Ethan said quickly. But Mia and I, we hid it. He swallowed hard. We didn't think it was right. I took the watch, turning it over in my hands. The weight of it, the feel of the worn leather band, it was like holding a piece of Dad again. Thanks, Ethan, I said quietly. He nodded, then shoved his hands in his pockets. Are we really getting kicked out? I sighed, rubbing my face. No, I meant what I said. You and Mia can stay. But Greg, he's done. Ethan nodded, like he expected that. Mom's mad. She always is. That actually made him smile a little. Yeah. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. I don't really care about Greg, he admitted. But please don't hate Mom. I didn't say anything. Not because I hated her, but because I wasn't sure how I felt anymore. The next morning, Mom didn't come out of her room. I wasn't surprised. She always ran when things didn't go her way. It wasn't until later in the afternoon that she finally showed herself. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she walked in. She looked different, not angry, not smug, just tired. I handed her a cup without a word. She took it, staring into it like it had answers she was looking for. I talked to Greg, she finally said. I leaned against the counter. And he's not coming back. I nodded. Good. She looked up at me, eyes searching. You really won't change your mind about the rent? I exhaled slowly. No, Mom, I won't. She pressed her lips together, like she was holding something back. Then she sighed. Fine. Just like that. No fight, no argument. Just acceptance. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I expected her to push, to scream, to make me the villain in all of this. But instead, she just looked deflated. Maybe she finally realized she had pushed too far. Maybe she finally understood that she had lost something she couldn't fix. Either way, it was done. That night, I sat outside on the porch, looking at the house. My house. It didn't feel real yet. For so long, I thought of this place as hers. But now, it was mine. And for the first time, I got to decide what that meant. Ethan and Mia were inside, watching a movie. Mom had retreated to her room again. The silence wasn't tense this time, just still. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. Not happy, not at peace, but not angry. And maybe that was enough for now. The first week after Greg left felt strange. Not because I missed him, far from it. The house was better without his smug attitude filling up the space. But there was a shift in the air, like something heavy had finally been lifted. Mom barely spoke to me. When she did, it was short, clipped sentences, like she was forcing herself to be civil. I didn't mind. Silence was better than another screaming match. She paid the rent on time. No complaints, no excuses, just a check on the kitchen counter at the start of the month. It was weird, but I wasn't about to question it. Ethan and Mia were the only ones who acted normal. Ethan still knocked on my door to talk about whatever game he was playing. Mia still asked me to help with her school projects. It was like, to them, nothing had really changed. Or maybe they were just relieved that Greg was gone. One night after dinner, Mia sat on the couch next to me, hugging a pillow. Do you think Greg is mad? I glanced at her. Mad at what? That we didn't leave with him. She picked at a loose thread on the pillow. I thought he'd call us or something, but he hasn't. I didn't have an answer for that. Greg never really cared about Ethan and Mia the way a real dad should. They were just part of the package deal when he married Mom. And now that he was out, he probably saw them as someone else's problem. I didn't say that, though. Instead, I just shook my head. If he wanted to check on you, he would. Mia nodded like she understood, but she still looked sad. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just my story. I wasn't the only one who lost something. A few weeks later, Uncle David stopped by. He brought coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched me for a long moment before speaking. You okay? I thought about that for a second. I think so, I said. He smirked. Big change, huh? Owning a house, dealing with all this family stuff. I huffed a laugh. Yeah, not exactly how I planned my life going. He took a sip of his coffee. You did the right thing, you know. I didn't answer right away, because part of me still wasn't sure. Yeah, I had stood up for myself. Yeah, I had taken back what was mine. But there was still this nagging feeling in my chest. Like maybe I should have handled it differently. Uncle David must have noticed, because he set his cup down and leaned forward. You gave them a chance, he said. More than they gave you. That's all you can do. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything. The months passed, and slowly, the house started feeling like mine. I repainted my room, replaced what was missing, even bought a new record player, not the same as the one Dad gave me, but close enough. Mom stayed out of my way, and I stayed out of hers. We weren't close. Maybe we never would be, but at least we weren't at war anymore. And Ethan and Mia, they still knocked on my door, still asked me for help with school, still treated me like family. Because at the end of the day, that's what we were. Not perfect, not normal, but family. And for now, that was enough.